Hi, Julie Perry and Brian Perry, Perry Home Solutions, Keller Williams Innovations, and we're here to bring you a real estate topic of the day. And today our topic is?
Our topic today is selling a house in a seller's market.
So what does it constitute a seller's market?
A seller's market is constituted by the supply and demand equation favoring the seller, where there's maybe fewer homes on the market and more buyers in the market.
And what are the dynamics of a seller's market? What goes on a seller's market?
It's easier to sell in and it's harder to buy in. That's definitely a big factor there. And
so how is it harder to buy? Of course, we understand in a seller's market, you probably get multiple offers. You maybe end up getting a little bit, higher price or maximum top dollar price that the market can bear. And so you might sell faster. So all that sounds good. If I'm a seller, that all sounds like positives, right?
Yeah, that's what most sellers want. You're usually asking for a seller's market. And in many ways, it benefits a seller because you have this scenario where multiple buyers are presumably going to come into your property simultaneously and make offers at the same time. And that is a big factor to getting the most money for your house, creating this auction-like environment. There are some drawbacks to it as well, though.
So on the buyer side, how would that be? If let's say I sell my house and then I need to move to my new home, so now I go from being the seller in the seller's market to being a buyer in a seller's market. So how does that go on that side?
Well, that's kind of the rub. That's kind of the challenge is all of the things that benefit you as a seller sort of work against you as a buyer in that same environment. Presuming that you're buying the same type of property, because as a side note, even though it is a seller's market right here now in South Florida, that doesn't really apply universally to every type of property that exists here. There's many different types of properties. There's vacation homes. There's condominiums on the waterfront. There's 55 and older. And even more than that. There's all kinds of different things. Not all of them are in a seller's market right now, but certainly the all-age communities are. So, but back to your question though, assuming that you're buying and selling within that same segment, it kind of works against you on the purchase side. And there's a rule in real estate, and that is if you have 4 offers on your house, you can only accept one. One person wins, and the rest of them do not. And it's never fun being one that does not.
So back to being the seller. So what would be? We already talked about all the positive or potential good things about selling a seller's market being on the seller side.
Yeah.
What would be the negatives or the not so great situations that would happen as a seller in a seller's market?
Well, one challenge in it. Obviously, if you're buying, that's a challenge as well, because it's great to sell, but it's tough to buy in. And if you have no place to go, that's certainly a big challenge, right? Mm-hmm. Now, we have ways to mitigate all of this, which I'd love to get into in a minute, but that's definitely a challenge. Also, a seller's market's really nice, but when it gets a little insane, we've had listings recently where we've had 50, 60, 70 showings in a weekend. That is insane. And some people might prefer that. They may think that's great. And by the way, I don't mind necessarily, but if you're living in the house, that can be quite difficult.
Disruptive. To your life.
Very disruptive, yes. And we have ways to mitigate that to a degree and make it more palatable and everything else to accommodate people when they're living in their homes. But it's not all rainbows and lollipops.
I would imagine it will also affect your time frame, because I think sometimes people go on the market thinking, I'm going to have some time. By the time, we have some showings and then we get an offer and then we'll close. I have plenty of time to kind of figure out where I'm going and kind of figure things out. But in a seller's market that, potentially things could be moving quickly and you might get an offer quickly, then all of a sudden your timeline accelerates. Mm-hmm. Now you're on the contract and now you have to figure out where you're going to go, and things can move a little faster, on that environment.
We call that a high quality problem, right? However, let me talk about how we mitigate these things to a degree, okay? Because the reality of it is when you list your home with me, as an example, you have no obligation to accept anything. It's my job to do a thorough job of evaluating your circumstances to make sure that it makes sense. It's the right time for you. It's a win-win, relationship with us and everything else. But at the end of the day, if somebody makes you an offer, even if it's full price, you're actually obligated to accept that offer. So if offers come in too quickly or they want to close too quickly, that's really more of a psychological problem than it is a sales problem, because we can always attempt to negotiate that. Or if it's completely untenable, we simply don't do it. We simply don't accept that offer. So that's one way to mitigate it. There's a couple of other little techniques that we use as well. For instance, a post-occupancy. Those are really tricky.
So what is a post-occupancy?
So a post-occupancy is where you sell the house, you close, you get all the money, the proceeds from the sale, and you're allowed to reside in the house for a period of time after the sale. Now, it's really renting the house. It's also called a leaseback because you are renting it, and generally speaking, you usually will have to pay some kind of rent to the buyer. And the reason is because it dramatically benefits the seller, and it really works a lot against the buyer. There's a lot of liability for buyers and things like that, but it can be a really fantastic way to mitigate this process to a large degree. And we're very good at negotiating that, making it all kind of balance out real well. So,
any other ways to mitigate that?
Not really.
Okay, sounds good. All right, very good. So any last words or anything take away?
Yeah, a couple of other things that you really want to pay attention to, especially in a seller's market or in any market, frankly. But these are things that are really crucial because when it's easy to sell and tough to buy in, you really have to take all of that into consideration up front. So there's a couple of key time frames in the contract that you really want to pay attention to. Number one is the inspection period. Most houses in this area are sold in an as-is way, in an as-is contract. And that gives an inspection period that begins at the very start of the contract where the buyer can back out for any reason whatsoever. That's part of how as-is works. Mm-hmm. Now, the trade-off for that is you're not obligated to do repairs to the property based on the appraisal, or the inspection, sorry. But nevertheless, that's a period of time which is quite crucial. So oftentimes you might want to wait for that period to elapse before you make any serious commitments. Exactly right. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you have things like mortgage commitments after that, appraisals.
Or any other contingencies based on the offer that you got, etc.
Yeah, we know about those going in, but definitely, these other factors like appraisal, obviously, that's a big one as well. So these things we help walk our clients through to make sure that all of these things are hitting exactly when they need to be hit and trying to, coordinate it with them as best as possible to make their move as smooth as possible to the next home.
And I would imagine also having as much clarity as you can going in. Like if you know you're going to be moving, have a clarity on where you're going to move, maybe narrow it down to a certain area or certain neighborhoods. So when you're searching, you can kind of stay focused because, time could be of the essence in a situation like this because you're closing on your house and then you have to find another one and close potentially at the same time, so a simultaneous closing, what we call them. Mm. So clarity from the beginning of once you sell, where you're going to go and what's going to be that next step and what you're looking for, the more clarity you have there, the less headache potentially down the road when you're actually looking.
No doubt about that. The old simultaneous close, Beverly Hillbilly Clampett style is definitely a challenge. And again, we have ways to work through that and help mitigate it. Mm-hmm. And so sellers markets are great. They're also really tricky, and they're not all roses and lollipops and rainbows. I think I added something there. And however, it can be put together in a way that's extremely beneficial for everybody involved. Win-wins for everybody.
Yes, win-wins is what we do.
Yes.
Yes. All right, very good. Stay tuned for more videos, and we'll talk to you next time.
Good day from Perry Home Solutions.